Two rivals from completely different worlds are forced onto the same ice. Phoenix Lennox, a powerful and famous hockey player known for his strength and intensity, and Soren Kingsley, an Olympic gold medalist figure skater admired for his precision and grace. What starts as constant tension, clashing personalities, and undeniable irritation slowly turns into something neither of them expected. As they train together, push each other's limits, and get pulled closer with every moment on the ice, their rivalry begins to blur into something deeper. In a story filled with passion, growth, and undeniable chemistry, Phoenix and Soren must decide, will they remain enemies or risk everything for a love they never saw coming? Chapter 1. Collision on Ice. The ice inside Montreal's Bell Center gleamed beneath the white blaze of overhead lights, smooth and flawless as polished glass. It was the kind of rink where legends were carved into history, where victories echoed for years and mistakes were replayed endlessly in slow motion. Phoenix Lennox had built his career in arenas like this. The air felt different when he stepped onto professional ice, charged, electric, anticipating impact. His skates touched the surface and immediately bit down, blades cutting deep as he pushed into motion. Strong strides, fast acceleration, sharp stops that sprayed snow in glittering arcs. Hockey was not subtle. It was velocity and strength and calculated aggression. It was bone-rattling hits and split-second decisions, and Phoenix was very, very good at it. The Winter Unity Showcase, however, was not a championship game. It was a charity collaboration between elite winter athletes, a media spectacle designed to unite different disciplines on one rink. Speed skaters stretched at one end, a pairs team rehearsed lifts at center ice. Cameras rolled from every angle. Sponsors hovered near the boards in designer coats. Phoenix adjusted the laces of his skates and surveyed the rink like it was foreign territory. Then he saw him, Soren Kingsley. Even from across the ice, he was unmistakable. Olympic gold medalist, three-time world champion, the face of modern figure skating. His performances were described as poetic, ethereal, transcendent. Commentators called him ice royalty. Phoenix had never understood that. Now, watching him glide across the rink, he felt something unfamiliar. Not admiration, exactly, but awareness. Soren moved differently than anyone else on the ice. Where hockey players cut and pivoted with force, Soren flowed. His edges were clean and deliberate, his posture tall and impossibly composed. When he pushed into a turn, it was silent, no harsh scraping, no aggressive spray, just control. He launched into a spin near center ice, arms drawing inward, rotations tightening, faster, faster, until he was a blur of black training fabric and pale hair beneath bright lights. Then he slowed with exquisite precision, extending one leg into a flawless exit edge that traced a gentle curve across the rink. A few volunteers along the boards clapped softly. Phoenix rolled his shoulders, feeling irritation coil low in his chest. It wasn't that Soren was bad, it was that he made it look easy. Phoenix pushed off harder than necessary, accelerating down the length of the rink. His strides were powerful, explosive, speed built beneath him, wind rushing in his ears. He didn't intend to cross Soren's path, but he didn't slow when he realized he would. Soren was gliding backward out of a step sequence, head turned slightly to check his positioning. Phoenix saw the moment their trajectories aligned. He could have shifted left. He didn't. They collided shoulder to shoulder. The impact echoed sharply against the high ceiling. Gasps rippled through the rink. Phoenix's balance wavered for half a second before he dug his blades deeper and stabilized. Soren slid back several feet, one skate scraping loudly across the surface. For a heartbeat, it looked like he would fall. Instead, he pivoted, seamlessly, converting lost momentum into rotation. He spun once, twice, then exited smoothly onto a steady edge, upright and controlled. The rink fell silent. Soren didn't look shaken. He looked annoyed. Phoenix exhaled through his nose. "Watch it." The words came out automatic, defensive. Soren's gaze lifted slowly to meet his. Up close, his eyes were colder than the ice beneath them. Not cruel, not angry, just precise. "Control," Soren said evenly, brushing imaginary frost from his sleeve, "is part of skating." Phoenix's jaw tightened. "Not where I'm from." A subtle shift in Soren's expression. "Then perhaps," he replied calmly, "you should expand your skill set." The words were quiet, measured, but they hit harder than any body check. Phoenix took a step closer without thinking. "You think I can't skate?" "I think," Soren said, voice smooth as glass, "that power without restraint is simply chaos." A few nearby athletes pretended not to listen. Phoenix felt heat rise under his collar despite the cold air. Chaos? He'd trained since childhood to control every ounce of force in his body. Every hit he delivered was calculated, every rush down the rink deliberate. "You don't survive in my league without discipline," Phoenix shed sharply. "And you don't win Olympic gold without precision," Soren countered. There it was, the spark. Not attraction, not yet. Challenge. Their worlds were different in every measurable way. Hockey valued dominance. Figure skating valued perfection. One thrived on contact, the other avoided it. They stood there on the same sheet of ice, separated by inches and entirely different philosophies. "Gentlemen," one of the event coordinators called nervously from the boards, "let's keep things collaborative, please." Soren stepped back first, not retreating, just disengaging. He gave Phoenix one final assessing look before pushing off, blades whispering softly as he rejoined his choreographer. Phoenix remained where he was for a moment longer, pulse still elevated. He told himself it was irritation, annoyance, competitive instinct. But as Soren launched into another fluid sequence across the rink, Phoenix's eyes followed him again. This time, not to challenge, to study. Because for the first time in a long while, Phoenix Lennox had met someone on the ice who didn't flinch. And that unsettled him more than the collision ever could.
Chapter 2. Media Firestorm. By sunrise, the collision had a life of its own. Phoenix woke to the vibration of his phone buzzing relentlessly against his nightstand, messages from teammates, notifications from sports networks, mentions, tags, headlines. He groaned and rolled onto his back, squinting at the ceiling before finally grabbing the phone. The first video he saw was slowed dramatically, the exact moment of impact replayed from 3 different angles, dramatic music layered underneath. Hockey star clashes with Olympic icon. Phoenix exhaled sharply through his nose. He watched the clip once, then again. From that angle, it did look aggressive. Soren's shoulder twisting on impact, the near fall, the recovery spin that followed, graceful, controlled, almost cinematic. The comments were worse. "Hockey players have no finesse. Protect Soren at all costs. Phoenix Lennox needs skating lessons." He tossed the phone aside and ran a hand over his face. He wasn't reckless. He never had been. Everything he did on the ice was deliberate, calculated. The speed, the hits, the sharp turns, they were part of his system, his system. Still, he couldn't ignore how easily Soren had recovered. That bothered him more than the headlines. Across the city, Soren was also watching the replay. His coach stood behind him in the hotel suite, arms crossed. "You see how this is being framed," his coach said carefully. Soren muted the video. Yes, public perception matters. You have endorsements tied to grace, precision, control. Soren inhaled slowly. He hated that word, perception. He had trained since childhood to perfect his craft, hours before sunrise, hours after sunset, bruised ankles, strained muscles, repeated failures before flawless performances. And yet the public narrative reduced him to delicate. He wasn't delicate, he was disciplined. There's a press conference at noon, his coach continued. Be measured. Soren gave a faint, humorless smile. I'm always measured. But his thoughts drifted back to the collision. Phoenix hadn't looked apologetic. He hadn't looked careless either. He had looked challenged, and that unsettled Soren in ways he didn't quite understand. The press conference room buzzed with anticipation. Long tables, bright lights, microphones lined neatly in front of nameplates. Phoenix arrived first, wearing a tailored black jacket over a plain shirt. He leaned back in his chair as cameras flashed, expression composed but unreadable. Moments later, Soren entered. The room shifted. Even without his skates, he carried himself like he was still gliding, posture tall, movements economical, gaze steady. He took the seat beside Phoenix. They did not acknowledge each other. Phoenix, the first reporter began, walk us through what happened during rehearsal. Phoenix leaned toward the microphone. Shared ice, high speed, miscalculated timing. So it was accidental? He paused just long enough to make the room tense. Yes. Soren felt that pause. Did you consider the risk involved skating that aggressively near figure skaters? Phoenix's jaw flexed. I always consider risk. A different reporter turned to Soren. You seemed unfazed after the impact. Soren folded his hands neatly. Falling is part of skating. Recovery is more important. Phoenix glanced sideways at that. The subtle implication hung in the air. Another question came quickly. Do you think hockey players lack the refinement necessary for collaborative events like this? The room quieted. Phoenix's fingers tapped once against the table. Soren answered first. Different disciplines prioritize different strengths, he said smoothly. Meaning? The reporter pressed. Soren finally turned his head, meeting Phoenix's gaze directly. Force and precision are not the same thing. The tension snapped tight. Phoenix's mouth curved faintly, not amused, not friendly. Precision doesn't win championships in my league, he replied. And force doesn't win Olympic gold, Soren countered softly. Camera shutters exploded in rapid bursts. The rivalry had officially moved beyond a collision.
Chapter 3. Forced Partnership. The first official joint practice was scheduled at 7 a.m. Phoenix arrived at 6:30. He told himself it was habit. Hockey players trained early. Discipline mattered. It had nothing to do with wanting to be first on the ice. The rink was quiet when he stepped in. The overhead lights still dimmed to half power. The ice gleamed faintly, freshly resurfaced, untouched. For a moment he simply stood there, breathing in the familiar cold air. Then he heard the soft glide of blades. Soren was already there. Of course he was. He was skating near center ice, headphones in, running a series of intricate edge drills. No dramatic jumps, no spins meant to impress, just quiet, relentless repetition. Forward inside edge, backward outside edge, transitions so subtle Phoenix almost missed them. Soren didn't look up immediately. Phoenix watched longer than he meant to. There was something different about Soren without cameras around, less polished, more focused. The perfection wasn't for applause, it was built here, in silence. Finally, Soren slowed, pulling out one earbud as he noticed Phoenix standing near the boards. "You're early," Soren said. "So are you." A beat passed. "This is a joint rehearsal. Punctuality matters." Phoenix stepped onto the ice. "I'm never late." "That remains to be seen." The faintest hint of challenge lingered in Soren's tone. Phoenix pushed off and skated toward center rink. His strides were naturally longer, heavier. The sound of his blades cutting the surface was sharper than Soren's near-silent glide. They stopped a few feet apart. An uneasy stillness settled between them. The choreographer entered moments later, clipboard in hand and optimism radiating dangerously. "Good," she said brightly. "You're both here. Let's begin." The routine concept was ambitious, a fusion of styles, hockey power blended with figure skating fluidity. It would open with parallel step sequences before transitioning into partnered elements, synchronized footwork, mirrored spins, and eventually a lift. Phoenix crossed his arms as the choreographer explained the sequence. "You'll need to soften your edges here," she said to him, pointing to a section of the music. "Less force." He frowned slightly. "That's not how I skate." "It is for this." Soren said nothing, but Phoenix caught the subtle arch of his brow. They took their starting positions. The music began, strong strings layered with percussion. They pushed off together. Within 5 seconds, it fell apart. Phoenix's stride was too long. Soren's timing was sharper. Their blades nearly clipped during a crossover. "Stop!" the choreographer called. Phoenix exhaled sharply. "Your tempo's off." Soren's head tilted. "My tempo is consistent. You're rushing. I'm precise. You're rigid. And you're careless." The words landed hard. Phoenix stepped closer. "Careless?" "You move like the ice belongs to you alone," Soren replied coolly. "This requires awareness. And you move like the world will collapse if you're half a second off," Phoenix shot back. Silence. The choreographer looked mildly panicked. "Again," she insisted. The second attempt wasn't much better. Phoenix struggled to shorten his stride without feeling restrained. Soren struggled to widen his movement without sacrificing control. They stopped mid-sequence when Phoenix's sudden stop sent a spray of ice across Soren's boots. Soren looked down at the frost on his sleek black skate covers. "That was unnecessary. It's called stopping. It's called excessive." Phoenix barked out a humorless laugh. "You always this dramatic?" "Only when provoked." Their eyes locked. Something electric passed between them. Not attraction, not yet, but intensity, awareness. The choreographer rubbed her temples. "We need trust for the partnered section." "Trust?" Phoenix repeated. "Yes, especially for the lift." Soren's posture shifted slightly at that word. Phoenix noticed that. "You don't think I can hold you?" Phoenix asked, tone sharp. Soren met his gaze evenly. "I think lifts require balance, not brute strength." Phoenix skated backwards a few feet, then stopped cleanly. "I bench more than your body weight." "That's reassuring, but irrelevant." The air tightened again. "Enough," the choreographer said firmly. "You two are champions in your respective sports. Start acting like it." The reprimand hit harder than either expected. They reset. This time, Phoenix consciously shortened his stride, forced his stops to be cleaner, less spray, more glide. It felt unnatural. Soren adjusted too, slightly broadening his arm lines to match Phoenix's presence, delaying transitions by half a beat to stay aligned. They moved through the opening sequence slowly. Not perfect, but closer. An hour later, sweat dampened the collar of Phoenix's shirt. Soren's breathing had grown heavier, though his expression remained composed. They were attempting the first partnered hold, a simple waist grip for synchronized turns. "Your hand placement needs to be here," Soren instructed, guiding Phoenix's hand slightly higher along his side. The contact was brief, but it was the first time they'd touched intentionally. Phoenix's fingers felt the lean muscle beneath layers of fabric, stronger than he'd expected. Soren seemed to notice the moment too, because his jaw tightened faintly before he stepped back. Again, Soren said. They pushed off together. The synchronized turn worked, not flawlessly, but solid. They slowed. For a split second, their hands lingered before separating. The choreographer's voice cut through. Better, much better. Phoenix exhaled. Soren gave a short nod. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't criticism either. Progress. By the end of practice, irritation had dulled into something else. Exhaustion. Respect, though neither would admit it yet. As they stepped off the ice, Phoenix grabbed his water bottle. "You're not as fragile as people say," Phoenix said casually, not looking directly at Soren. Soren paused. "I've never been fragile." Phoenix nodded once. "Yeah, I see that." Soren studied him for a moment. "You're not as reckless as you look." Phoenix huffed faintly. "I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't entirely one." A faint smirk tugged at Phoenix's mouth. Soren turned to leave, then stopped. "Tomorrow," he said, "we start the lift." Phoenix's pulse ticked up slightly. "Be ready," Soren added. Phoenix met his gaze steadily. "I always am." Soren held that look a second longer than necessary. Then he walked away. Phoenix remained near the boards, watching him go. The hostility was still there, the rivalry still sharp, but beneath it now was something more dangerous than irritation, understanding, and perhaps, just barely, anticipation. Chapter 4. Cracks in the Ice. The next morning, the rink felt different. Not warmer, that was impossible, but charged. The lift. That was the focus today. Phoenix had replayed the choreography in his mind the entire night before. Not because he doubted his strength. Strength had never been the issue. He could lift defensemen heavier than Soren and hold them steady against the boards. But this wasn't about force. This was about control. That word again. He arrived early. Again. Soren was already on the ice. Again. But today, Soren wasn't running footwork drills. He was stretching near the boards, one leg extended behind him in a perfect line, ankle flexed carefully. Phoenix noticed the slight stiffness when Soren lowered it. "Injured?" Phoenix asked without preamble as he stepped onto the ice. "No," Soren said without looking at him immediately. "That didn't look like no." Soren straightened. "It's nothing significant." Phoenix skated closer, slower this time, not charging, not challenging. "You notice a lot for someone who claims I skate too delicately." Phoenix shrugged. "I notice what affects the routine." A beat passed. That wasn't entirely true, but Soren didn't call him out on it. The choreographer arrived, clipboard in hand, determined optimism once again in place. "Today," she announced, "we build trust." Phoenix resisted the urge to comment. Soren simply nodded. They began with smaller partnered elements, waist holds, side-by-side turns, transitions where Phoenix had to adjust his natural momentum to match Soren's cleaner glide. It wasn't smooth at first. Phoenix's stops were still too sharp, Soren's timing still too exacting. But something subtle had shifted since yesterday. The insults were gone. In their place, corrections. "Shorter stride there," Soren instructed calmly. "Delay your rotation half a beat," Phoenix countered. They weren't snapping. They were listening. The lift loomed at the end of the session. When the choreographer finally clapped her hands and said, "All right, let's try it," the air tightened instantly. The move was simple in theory. Soren would skate into Phoenix's path, plant his blade, and transfer weight upward as Phoenix lifted him at the waist into a one-arm supported extension. In theory. In reality, it required absolute synchronization. "Ready?" Phoenix asked. Soren held his gaze. Yes. The music started. They skated through the preceding sequence, cleaner than yesterday, more aligned. Phoenix adjusted his edge to stay precisely within Soren's timing. Soren pushed forward into the setup. "Now," he murmured. Phoenix caught him at the waist, lifted. For half a second, it worked. Then Soren's ankle faltered. His balance shifted unexpectedly. Phoenix reacted on instinct, tightening his grip and lowering him quickly, but not quickly enough to avoid the stumble. They both slid sideways, blades scraping. Soren's hand shot to Phoenix's shoulder to steady himself. Silence. "You hesitated," Soren said, breath slightly uneven. "You shifted your weight," Phoenix shot back. "My timing was correct. Your ankle wasn't." The words hung in the air. Soren's expression cooled instantly. "I said I'm fine." Phoenix stepped closer, lowering his voice. "And I'm saying you're compensating. I don't need you analyzing me, and I don't need you risking the lift." The tension flared. Not explosive like before, sharper, more personal. Soren pulled away first. "I have skated through injuries far worse than this," he said quietly. Phoenix's jaw flexed. "That's not something to brag about." Soren's eyes flashed. "You think hockey players don't play through pain?" "We do," Phoenix replied immediately, "but we don't pretend it doesn't exist." The words hit harder than either intended. For a moment, the rink felt too quiet. Soren looked away, and that was the first crack, not in his ankle, in his armor. They tried again. This time, Phoenix adjusted his stance before the lift, grounding himself more solidly, anticipating imbalance. Soren pushed forward. Phoenix caught him, lifted, higher. Soren extended instinctively, body aligning into the shape drilled into him since childhood. One arm reached outward, chin lifted, lines perfect. For a suspended second, they were balanced. Phoenix felt the shift in weight, the tremor in Soren's stabilizing leg. He compensated without thinking, tightening slightly, redistributing force through his core instead of his arms. Soren felt it, the steadiness, the absence of panic. Phoenix lowered him slowly. Their faces were inches apart when Soren's skates touched the ice again. Neither moved immediately. "You adjusted," Soren said quietly. "You shifted your weight," Phoenix replied. Their eyes locked. The hostility wasn't gone, but something else had layered over it. Respect. They took a short break after that. Soren sat on the bench, unlacing his skates slightly to relieve pressure on his ankle. Phoenix stood nearby, arms crossed. "You should ice that," he said. Soren glanced up. "You sound like my coach." "Maybe your coach is right." Soren studied him for a moment. "You're different when cameras aren't around," he said. Phoenix frowned faintly. "Different how?" "You're less defensive." Phoenix considered that. "You're different too," he said. Soren arched a brow. "Less untouchable." Soren didn't respond immediately. Then, softly, "No one is untouchable." The admission lingered between them. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was honest. They resumed practice with renewed focus. The lift succeeded twice more, not flawless, but solid. As they finished the final run-through, Phoenix misjudged a transitional edge and nearly lost balance. Soren caught him instinctively, hands gripping Phoenix's forearms. They both froze. Soren laughed suddenly, bright, surprised. "You almost fell," he said. Phoenix blinked. "That's not funny." "It is," Soren insisted, still smiling. "You look personally offended by gravity." Phoenix tried not to smile, failed. The sound of Soren's laughter echoed lightly in the rink. It didn't feel sharp, it felt warm, and Phoenix realized something unsettling. He liked it. When practice ended, they stood at opposite ends of the boards, gathering their things. "You're improving," Soren said without looking at him. "You're tolerable," Phoenix replied. A pause. Then Soren's mouth curved faintly. "That might be the closest you come to a compliment." Phoenix adjusted his bag over his shoulder. "Don't let it go to your head." Soren stepped past him toward the exit. "Tomorrow," he said, glancing back briefly, "we attempt the full sequence." Phoenix nodded. "Be ready." Soren held his gaze a second longer than necessary. "I trust you won't drop me." It wasn't a challenge this time. It was something else. Phoenix answered without hesitation, "I won't." Soren didn't smile, but he didn't look doubtful either. As he walked away, Phoenix remained where he was, staring out over the empty ice. The rivalry was still there, but the edges were softening, cracking, and beneath it, something far more dangerous was beginning to take shape.
Chapter 5. Behind the Spotlight. The rink was almost unrecognizable without cameras. No production crew, no lighting rigs, no commentators rehearsing dramatic lines about a historic collaboration. Just dim overhead lamps casting long reflections across untouched ice. Phoenix hadn't meant to come back that night. He'd left practice restless, the lift replaying in his mind, the way Soren had said, "I trust you," echoing more than it should have. Trust wasn't a word thrown around lightly in hockey. Trust meant someone would have your back when bodies collided at full speed. Trust meant knowing your teammate would take the hit if you couldn't. It wasn't delicate, it wasn't graceful, but it was sacred. Phoenix told himself he just needed extra skate time. That was why he returned. It had nothing to do with the faint, persistent thought that Soren might be here too. The arena doors creaked slightly as he stepped inside, and there he was, Soren Kingsley, alone at center ice. No dramatic jumps, no crowd-pleasing spins, just slow, deliberate edge work, carving controlled arcs into the surface, one after another. His movements were quieter tonight, almost introspective. He hadn't noticed Phoenix yet. Phoenix didn't announce himself. He leaned against the boards, watching. Soren's face was different when he thought no one was looking. The sharp composure softened, the perfection loosened just enough to reveal effort beneath it. After a few minutes, Soren slowed, gliding toward the boards to adjust his laces. "You're going to wear the ice thin," Phoenix said casually. Soren glanced up, surprised. "You're going to sneak up on people one day and regret it." Phoenix stepped onto the ice. "Didn't think you'd be here." "I prefer a quiet practice." "At midnight?" Soren stood, pushing off into a slow glide. "Noise is distracting." Phoenix followed, keeping a respectful distance. "You don't like noise?" "I don't like chaos." The word hung between them. Phoenix almost laughed at the irony. They circled the rink slowly, not quite skating together, but not entirely separate either. "You don't stop," Phoenix observed. "Neither do you." "That's different." "Is it?" Phoenix frowned faintly. Soren shifted direction, skating backward now, eyes locked on Phoenix with steady focus. "You hit harder when you're frustrated," Soren said calmly. "I skate longer." Phoenix slowed. "Frustrated about what?" Soren didn't answer immediately. He turned forward again, pushing into a gentle curve. "Expectations," he said finally. The word felt heavier tonight. "You already won Olympic gold. What else do they want?" "More." The answer was immediate. "There's always another medal, another program, another standard to exceed." Phoenix watched the faint tension settle in Soren's shoulders. "And if you don't?" he asked. Soren's lips pressed thin. "Then they say you've peaked." Phoenix knew that narrative. Hockey analysts loved to declare players washed up after one mediocre season. "They said that about me 2 years ago," Phoenix admitted quietly. Soren's gaze glanced at him. "You came back stronger," he said. "I had something to prove." Soren's gaze sharpened slightly. "And now?" Phoenix hesitated. Now he had something different. He didn't say it. Instead, he changed the subject. "Your ankle." Soren stiffened faintly. "It's a strain, nothing severe." "You should rest." "And lose consistency?" "You're not a machine." "No," Soren agreed softly, "but I'm treated like one." The honesty caught Phoenix off guard. For a moment neither spoke. They skated side by side now, movements unplanned but synchronized.
Phoenix broke the silence. Do you ever get tired of being perfect? Soren laughed, but there was no humor in it. Perfection is survival. That sounds exhausting. It is. They slowed near center ice. The rink felt vast and empty around them. Without the spotlight, Soren looked younger somehow, less like an icon, more like a man who had spent his entire life chasing an invisible line that kept moving further away. Phoenix stepped closer. You don't have to be perfect here, he said quietly. Here? With me? The words came out before Phoenix could overthink them. Soren held his gaze for a long moment. You're competitive to a fault, he said softly. Yeah. You push. Yeah. And yet, Soren continued, you adjust when it matters. Phoenix didn't respond. Soren shifted direction, skating backward now, eyes locked on Phoenix with steady focus. You didn't answer earlier, Soren said quietly. About what? About why you actually came back tonight. Phoenix hesitated. Because he didn't want to say it, because saying it made it real. I don't like unfinished business, Phoenix said finally. Soren's brow lifted slightly. And what's unfinished? Phoenix met his eyes steadily. This. The single word carried more weight than intended. Soren's breath hitched, barely noticeable, but Phoenix saw it. The space between them felt charged again, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was something warmer, something slower. Soren broke eye contact first, pushing off gently. Tomorrow, he said, voice steadier than his expression, we'll run the full program. Phoenix followed. Yeah. Soren skated a few feet ahead before glancing back. You won't drop me. It wasn't a question. Phoenix answered without hesitation. I won't. Soren nodded once. Trust. The word echoed again, and Phoenix realized something unsettling. He didn't just want to prove he could lift Soren. He wanted to be the one Soren trusted to catch him, on the ice and off it. As they left the rink together, the silence between them felt different, less hostile, less defensive. The cracks in the rivalry were widening, and something warmer was beginning to show through. Chapter 6. Falling. The arena was louder the next morning. Not with fans, those would come later, but with production crews running tables, lighting technicians adjusting beams, organizers pacing with clipboards. The showcase was only 3 days away. Pressure had settled over the rink like frost. Phoenix felt it immediately. He stepped onto the ice and scanned for Soren. He found him near the far boards, already in motion. There was something sharper about him today. His movements were crisp, almost surgical. Every transition landed precisely on beat, every extension deliberate. No wasted energy, no visible hesitation. Phoenix skated toward him. You're pushing too hard, he said, without greeting. Soren didn't stop. We run the full program today. That's not what I meant. Soren slowed just enough to look at him, then clarify. Phoenix crossed his arms. Your ankle. It's stable. That's not the same as healed. Soren's jaw tightened faintly. I know my limits. Do you? The question hung between them longer than either expected. Before Soren could respond, the choreographer clapped her hands sharply. All right, full run. No stopping unless someone is bleeding. Phoenix almost smirked. Soren did not. They moved into position. Opening stance, opposite ends of center ice. The music began, strong strings rising under a steady percussive rhythm. They pushed off together. The opening sequence flowed better than it ever had. Phoenix shortened his stride naturally now, no longer forcing it. His stops were cleaner, his transitions smoother. Soren adjusted without visible effort, broadening his movements just enough to complement Phoenix's presence. They were no longer fighting the choreography, they were shaping it. The synchronized step sequence passed without incident. The waist-hold turn landed clean. Even the tight mirrored spin aligned perfectly. Phoenix's rotation stronger, Soren's tighter, but together balanced. Then came the lift. Phoenix's pulse ticked up. Soren skated toward him, expression calm but eyes alert. "Trust me." Phoenix set his stance before Soren even reached him. Hands at the waist, timing precise. Lift. This time there was no falter, no shift, no stumble. Soren rose smoothly, body extending into the programmed line, one arm reaching outward, back arching gracefully. But something was different. He didn't brace, he didn't compensate, he didn't prepare for failure. He relaxed, and Phoenix felt it. The full transfer of weight, the complete surrender of control. For a split second, Phoenix forgot the choreography, forgot the cameras being tested overhead, forgot the choreographer watching from the boards. All he felt was the warmth of Soren's body supported in his hands, and the steady rhythm of his own breathing, grounding them both. He held him a fraction longer than rehearsed. Soren's eyes dropped to meet his. Blue. Clear. Unshielded. Lower. The music shifted toward its final swell. Phoenix brought him down slowly, carefully. Their skates touched the ice at the same moment. Perfect landing. But neither stepped away. They were too close, breath mingling in the cold air. "You didn't hesitate," Soren said quietly. "You didn't brace," Phoenix replied. A faint, almost invisible smile touched Soren's mouth. "No," he admitted, "I didn't." The music ended. The rink fell silent except for the faint hum of overhead lights. The choreographer's voice broke the stillness. "That," she said breathlessly, "is what we need." They separated then, but the air between them had changed. They took a short break afterward. Soren sat on the bench, rolling his ankle gently. Phoenix stood nearby, pretending to scroll through his phone, but very much aware of the way Soren's breathing hadn't fully steadied yet. "You trusted me," Phoenix said finally. Soren glanced up. "Yes." "Why?" The question wasn't accusatory, it was genuine. Soren studied him for a moment before answering. "Because you pay attention." Phoenix blinked faintly. "Most people focus on the spectacle. You focus on the mechanics." "That's hockey." "No," Soren said softly. "That's you." The words landed deeper than Phoenix expected. He sat down beside Soren, closer than before. "You could have gotten hurt," Phoenix said. "I could have," Soren agreed. "But you didn't." "No." Another pause. Then Soren added quietly, "You wouldn't have let me." Phoenix didn't have a response to that, because Soren was right. He wouldn't have. They ran the program again and again, each time smoother, each time less technical, more instinctive. By the fourth run-through, something subtle happened during the lift. Soren's hand, instead of resting lightly on Phoenix's shoulder for balance, curled slightly into the fabric of his shirt, not out of fear, out of grounding. Phoenix noticed. He didn't comment, but he adjusted his grip in response, thumb pressing more securely at Soren's side. When they landed, their hands separated more slowly. The shift wasn't obvious to anyone watching, but it was undeniable to them. After practice, the rink emptied quickly. Phoenix lingered, unlacing his skates slowly. Soren approached, jacket slung over one shoulder. "You held me longer today," Soren said. Phoenix didn't look up immediately. "You noticed." "I notice a lot." Phoenix met his gaze. "I didn't want to rush it." "Why?" "Because lowering you feels like ending something." He didn't say that. Instead, he shrugged lightly. "It felt right." Soren stepped closer. "Falling is part of skating," he said softly. Phoenix tilted his head. "You planning to?" Soren's lips curved faintly. Only if someone catches me." The words lingered in the air between them. Phoenix stood, closing the distance until there were only inches left. "I would," Phoenix said. No teasing, no arrogance, just truth. Soren's breath hitched slightly, and for the first time since they'd collided on the ice days ago, neither of them looked ready to pull away. The rivalry was still there, the tension still electric, but it had shifted. They weren't pushing against each other anymore. They were leaning in, and somewhere between force and precision, they had found balance. Chapter 7. Rumors. By midweek, the media frenzy had begun. Phoenix found out the hard way. He was scrolling through his phone during a rare moment off the ice when his feed exploded with notifications. GIFs of the lift, slow-motion videos of the synchronized spin, and captions designed to incite maximum speculation. Hockey heartthrob and figure skating icon, sparks fly on ice? Are Phoenix, Lennox, and Soren Kingsley more than teammates? Collaboration or chemistry? Winter Showcase duo has fans talking. Phoenix groaned and threw the phone onto the couch. The edges of his vision burned faintly from all the screen time. His teammates had already teased him mercilessly in group chat. "Finally," one had texted, "you meet your match. Didn't see you handling Grace this well." Phoenix had muttered something incomprehensible and ignored the rest. Across the city, Soren was experiencing the same thing. He sat in a quiet hotel lounge, fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood of the table. His coach hovered nearby, concern written across her face. "You're letting them get to you. Ignore the speculation, focus on the routine." Soren didn't respond immediately. His gaze had settled on the phone screen, where fan accounts dissected every fleeting glance and touch between Phoenix and Soren during practice. "They're reading too much into everything," Soren said, voice tight. "They see what's there," the coach replied. "They just don't know what it means." Soren didn't answer. He had an uneasy awareness that maybe, just maybe, they did. The next practice was heavier than ever. Fans weren't allowed, but the journalists had already circulated their videos widely. Comments filled the public forums, many calling for closer observation. Organizers insisted on private rehearsals, but even then, Phoenix could feel the weight of expectation hanging over the rink. Soren arrived first, dressed in dark training gear, hair slightly damp from a previous solo session. He skated towards center ice with the kind of quiet determination that made Phoenix want to push harder without even realizing it. "You're late," Soren said as Phoenix stepped onto the ice. "I'm on time," Phoenix replied, adjusting his gloves. Soren tilted his head. "By your standard, yes. By mine, we might call it tardy." Phoenix snorted but didn't respond further. The familiar banter was there, sharp edges meeting, yet it carried an unspoken rhythm that neither had acknowledged until now. They moved through the opening sequence, step for step, faster this time, building momentum. Every slide, turn, and stop was precise. The synchronized spin followed, seamless. Then the lift approached. Phoenix took his stance and waited for Soren. He noticed something subtle. Soren's hesitation, just a fraction, at the approach. "Your ankle?" Phoenix asked, quietly. "It's fine," Soren replied, but his voice carried no force. Phoenix didn't press further. Instead, he shifted slightly, adjusting his grip. Lift. Soren rose smoothly, extending into the line. Phoenix held him there longer than necessary, not intentionally, but because he could feel the trust Soren had placed in him, and it terrified him to let go. When Soren landed, their hands lingered. Phoenix felt the faintest brush of Soren's fingers, a grounding contact, unplanned yet deliberate. They separated, but the air between them had changed. The intimacy wasn't public, wasn't performative, it was theirs. Later, in the locker room, the subtle shift was undeniable. Phoenix leaned against a bench, towel draped around his neck. "You know," he began, casually tossing his words like a puck, "people are talking." Soren glanced up, unamused. "They always talk." "Yeah, but now it's different." "Different how?" "Your lift," Phoenix said, voice softer than usual. "The way you let me hold you, people saw it." "And?" "And," Phoenix faltered. He wasn't used to saying things like this. "And it matters, apparently." Soren leaned back against his locker, silent for a moment. Then he gave a faint shrug. "It shouldn't," Phoenix countered. "Doesn't mean it won't," Phoenix countered, feeling the heat rise under his collar. Soren didn't respond immediately. He was studying him, the way Soren always did, like analyzing every micro shift in balance. "You're different, Phoenix," Soren finally said. "You're attentive, not just skilled, but aware." Phoenix blinked. "Is that a compliment?" Soren smirked faintly, but there was no teasing in it. "You'll figure it out." The media scrutiny only intensified outside the rink. Every training session, every subtle glance, every touch captured by someone's lens, replayed online. Fans speculated endlessly, some drawing elaborate conclusions about the nature of their relationship. Phoenix hated it, and yet, deep down, a small part of him didn't. Soren, for his part, was more contained, but he too felt the tension. The attention was uncomfortable, but it forced him to see the truth of what he felt. He didn't just rely on Phoenix during lifts, he wanted to. He sought his steadiness without admitting it. By the end of the day, when they left the rink together, neither spoke, but the brush of their arms, the way their shoulders occasionally grazed as they exited, carried a weight that no headline could capture. And in the quiet of that contact, both realized what was developing between them had little to do with the public eye and everything to do with the ice. The trust, the tension, the vulnerability, and the unspoken pull. The rivalry still existed, sharp as ever, but beneath, something else was taking root, something neither Phoenix or Soren could ignore any longer. Chapter 8. Off-Ice Moments. The hotel lounge smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Phoenix had shown up without thinking. He told himself it was casual, caffeine before morning practice, a chance to sit and focus. But when he saw Soren already there, quietly reading through a notebook of choreography notes, the air tightened. Soren glanced up as Phoenix approached. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes, those pale, calculating eyes, measured him carefully. "Coffee?" Phoenix asked, nodding toward the counter. Soren closed his notebook slowly. Black, no sugar. Phoenix raised an eyebrow. "Seriously, nothing else?" "Nothing else." Phoenix shrugged and ordered a latte for himself, creamy and too sweet, the way he liked it. He carried it back to the table, sliding into the seat across from Soren. They didn't speak immediately. The low hum of the lounge filled the silence. Distant conversations, the clink of cups, the soft hiss of the espresso machine. Finally, Soren spoke. "You skate differently when no one's watching." Phoenix tilted his head. "That's supposed to be a compliment or a critique?" "Observation," Soren replied. "Neutral." Phoenix smirked faintly. "Neutral, huh? Classic Soren." Soren's lips quirked upward, just enough to be noticeable. Then he turned his attention back to the notebook in front of him. Phoenix studied him, the precision, the focus, the slight crease of concentration between his brows. It was a side of Soren that cameras never captured. Not the glitz, not the gold medals, not the applause, just the man behind the mask of perfection. "I didn't know you carried a notebook," Phoenix asked casually. Soren glanced up. "I document everything, movements, timing, modifications, details that might seem insignificant but are critical." Phoenix nodded slowly. "Sounds exhausting." Soren didn't answer immediately. Then softly, "It's worth it." Something about the tone made Phoenix lean back slightly. There was pride there, yes, but also vulnerability, a hint that perfection was not effortless, that every flawless routine had been carved out of pain, repetition, and relentless discipline. I get it. Trust me, I do. I've lived in that world too. Just different rules, different ice, same pressure. Soren studied him closely. You understand? Phoenix nodded. Yeah, people think it's about brute force, but it's control, balance, timing, anticipation. You're skating against expectations as much as against gravity. I get that. For a moment, Soren said nothing. The quiet stretched long, comfortable, yet loaded with unspoken acknowledgement. Then, unexpectedly, Soren leaned forward, elbows resting lightly on the table. You're not like the others. Phoenix frowned. Others? All the people who just see my gold medals, my routines, my fame. You notice the mechanics, the subtle shifts. You pay attention. Phoenix felt his chest tighten. It wasn't flattery, it was recognition, a rare, honest recognition that struck differently than applause or commentary ever had. You're observant, Soren continued, in a way I didn't expect from a hockey player. Phoenix laughed softly, low enough that it was more a breath than a sound. You have a lot of expectations about hockey players. And you have a lot of assumptions about figure skaters, Soren countered smoothly. Phoenix shook his head. Fair enough. Guess we both have to adjust. The subtle ease of the conversation, the quiet laughter, the absence of rivalry, it was disarming. Phoenix realized he could talk to Soren without skating around every word, without guarding his reactions. For the first time, the icy barrier between them softened. Not gone, not melted, just shifting, cracking gently. Soren shifted in his seat, glancing down at his notebook, then back up. I wasn't sure you'd show up here. Why not? Phoenix asked, tone deliberately casual. Because I didn't know if you cared about more than the routine, Soren said quietly. Phoenix studied him. The subtle vulnerability in his gaze was something Phoenix hadn't anticipated. I do, he admitted simply. I care about doing this right, about making sure we succeed. Soren nodded slowly. And about more? Phoenix met his eyes steadily. Yeah, about more. The words weren't dramatic, they weren't shouted, but they held weight, and Soren understood. They sat in silence after that, sipping coffee. The air was no longer charged with rivalry or tension. It was charged with potential, a quiet acknowledgement that the dynamic between them was shifting. The time together off the ice and away from cameras had revealed what practice couldn't: trust, attention, and the faintest spark of something neither wanted to admit, but both felt. When they finally left the lounge, they walked side by side, shoulders brushing occasionally. Neither spoke, neither needed to. The quiet understanding between them said everything. Outside, the city was quiet beneath the snow, but between Phoenix and Soren, a storm of emotions was beginning, subtle, slow, undeniable. And for the first time, Phoenix realized that falling for Soren might not be a collision he could control. Chapter 9. Spotlight Pressure. The rink smelled of cold metal and ice shavings. Cameras were set up along the boards, bright lights aimed at the ice. Technicians adjusted microphones to catch the faintest scrape of blades. Even without fans, the arena felt full, filled with expectation, anticipation, and an invisible audience watching their every move. Phoenix arrived first. The usual surge of adrenaline hit him as soon as he stepped onto the ice. The press had leaked clips of the previous lifts, the synchronized spins. Speculation was everywhere, fans dissecting every glance, every touch, every misstep. The hashtag for the showcase was trending internationally. Soren arrived shortly after, quiet as ever, black leggings and a fitted top that emphasized every line of his long, lean frame. His hair was damp, slicked back from morning practice.
He didn't acknowledge Phoenix at first, eyes scanning the ice, mind calculating steps, edges, weight distribution. Phoenix tilted his head, catching the faintest furrow in Soren's brow. "You're tense," he said, casually, keeping his distance. Soren glanced at him briefly. "Focused," he replied. Phoenix didn't push. He knew that tone. He had it himself sometimes, before big games, before important plays. The tension wasn't anger or hostility. It was concentration, coiled and ready. The choreographer clapped her hands. "Today we go full routine. Every move counts." Phoenix nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He had practiced lifts countless times now. Spins, footwork, coordination, all rehearsed to the point of muscle memory. But the spotlight added a new dimension. Eyes were on them, not just evaluators, not just organizers, but the world watching through screens. Soren skated into position. Phoenix mirrored him, taking his stance with precise alignment. The opening sequence flowed, sharper, cleaner, more aligned than ever. Every step, every turn a dance of power and precision. Then came the lift. Soren approached, rhythm steady, eyes locked on Phoenix's hands. Phoenix braced. Lift. This time it was perfect. Soren extended, body balanced and elegant, every muscle controlled, every line exact. And yet something shifted. His gaze met Phoenix's, and for the first time during a lift, there was no shield, no instinctive barrier, just trust, and something more, something electric, intimate that neither could deny. Phoenix's heart raced, not from the physical exertion, not from the fear of dropping Soren, from the awareness that every movement, every breath between them was being observed, dissected, commented on, and yet it didn't matter, not in that moment. They landed smoothly. Hands lingered briefly before separating. Phoenix felt the faint pressure of Soren's hand brush against his. Just a touch, a grounding gesture. The choreographer clapped from the boards. "Beautiful! You've captured the chemistry!" Phoenix exhaled sharply, though Soren barely reacted. His calm exterior masked the tiny flicker of awareness he couldn't hide. Later in the locker room, the tension shifted. Phones buzzed constantly, messages from agents, fans, media outlets. Headlines repeated, rumors swirling. On-ice tension or off-ice romance? Olympic gold meets hockey strength, sparks fly in winter showcase duo. Phoenix scrolled through them, jaw tight. He had always cared about public perception, not for fame, because every misstep could be blown out of proportion. Soren, as always, was composed, but Phoenix noticed him glance at the phone once, thumb hovering over the screen, tension in his fingers. "You see this?" Phoenix asked, not showing emotion. Soren tilted his head. "I've seen it. Headlines don't matter." "People are talking," Phoenix said. "About us." Soren's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and assessing. "They always talk."
"Yeah, but this time it's different," Phoenix pressed. "They're watching how we move together, how we connect." Soren didn't respond immediately. His jaw tightened. Finally, he said softly, almost a whisper, "Do you care?" Phoenix froze. He hadn't expected the question. "Of course I care. Not about the rumors. About you. About this." Soren's pale eyes widened fractionally. "This?" Phoenix swallowed. "The way we skate. The way we trust each other. The way, I don't know, I feel when I'm holding you." Soren studied him for a long moment. "You're honest," he said quietly. "And you're pretending not to notice," Phoenix replied, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. Soren didn't argue. Instead, he leaned back against the locker, gaze steady, expression unreadable. The spotlight makes everything complicated. It's already complicated, even without it. Soren let out a soft laugh. "We're athletes. We thrive under pressure." "Some pressure," Phoenix said, voice low. I don't mind. Soren raised an eyebrow. Some? Phoenix met his gaze, bold now. The right pressure. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Neither needed to speak. The understanding was mutual. Tension, intimacy, rivalry, trust, all layered into that single unspoken acknowledgement. When the media caught wind of their interaction, a slight brush of shoulders in the locker room, lingering glances during practice, speculation ignited further. Phoenix didn't care. Soren didn't care. Not really. Because despite the public gaze, despite the expectations, despite the swirling rumors, they had each other. And for the first time, that was enough. Chapter 10. Final Performance. The arena was alive. Lights blazed, crowd murmurs swelled, and the polished ice gleamed like a mirror under the intense beams. Cameras rolled from every angle. Commentators whispered into headsets, describing every detail with dramatic flair, while fans in the stands waved signs and shouted names. Phoenix stood at the edge of the ice, helmet tucked under his arm. His heart pounded, not from nerves, not from adrenaline, but from the way Soren's eyes met his across the rink. Calm, steady, unyielding, yet vulnerable. This was it, the culmination of days of practice, rivalry, tension, trust, and everything that had built between them. Soren skated forward first, his warm-up laps precise, almost hypnotic. Every edge, every line, every breath measured. Gold medalist precision, honed over years, now tempered with something softer, something Phoenix could see only because he had been there for the cracks and adjustments, the quiet practices, the moments when cameras weren't watching. Phoenix adjusted his gloves, gritted his teeth, and pushed off. Hockey stride first, power behind him, but modified, shorter, cleaner, aligned to Soren's pace. They met at center ice. The opening notes began, strings swelling, punctuated with crisp percussion. They moved together immediately, footwork in sync, weight balanced perfectly. The opening mirrored turns landed without flaw. Phoenix felt Soren's subtle adjustments beneath his fingers, the slight hesitation in his lift transitions, the careful lean when Phoenix pushed forward. Every motion reflected not just practice, but awareness, trust, and chemistry. And then it came, the lift. Soren skated into position. Phoenix braced. Hands at the waist, timing perfect. Phoenix lifted. Soren extended. Higher, and held. Phoenix felt the weight of Soren, trust placed entirely on him, surrendered in a way no words could capture. Their eyes met midair. For a suspended moment, the entire arena, the lights, the crowd, the cameras, the whispers, none of it existed. It was just the two of them, balancing perfectly. Trust and tension mingling with a quiet, undeniable intimacy. Phoenix adjusted slightly, core tightening, arms steady. Soren's body was fluid in his hands, but the subtle pressure of his fingertips curling into Phoenix's shirt anchored them both. A silent acknowledgement. I trust you. I see you. Landing was smooth, hands separated. They continued the routine flawlessly. Spins, turns, footwork, mirrored extensions, every move a dance of power and elegance. And all the while, Phoenix felt the eyes of the world on them, yet he couldn't tear his gaze from Soren. The routine neared its climax. The final synchronized spin approached. Phoenix and Soren glided side by side, edges cutting ice crisply, bodies leaning perfectly in harmony. The final lift. Phoenix took his stance. Soren skated forward, confident yet slightly hesitant, the tiny imperfection Phoenix had come to know and respect. Hands at the waist, Phoenix lifted. Soren extended fully, back arching, one arm reaching upward as if to touch the ceiling. Phoenix held him longer than rehearsed, letting the moment linger. Not just the lift, the culmination of everything: rivalry, tension, trust, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. When Soren landed, their hands lingered briefly before separating. For just a fraction of a second, the world felt suspended. Then the music ended. Applause thundered, the audience on their feet, cameras flashed, commentators shouted, words tumbling over each other in excitement. Phoenix and Soren skated to center ice, breathing hard, sweat glinting under the lights. They faced the audience together. Then, in a rare private moment, Phoenix whispered, just low enough for Soren alone to hear, "I wouldn't drop you." Soren's lips curved into a faint smile, just a fraction, barely noticeable to anyone else, but it was enough. "I know," he replied softly. The arena erupted around them, fans cheering, cameras flashing. But Phoenix didn't hear it. He didn't feel it. All he felt was Soren beside him, steady, calm, alive. And for the first time, he didn't need to fight, didn't need to prove anything. He had earned Soren's trust, and he had given Soren his own. They exited the ice together, side by side, shoulders brushing, hands occasionally grazing, small touches, subtle gestures, the kind that carried more weight than any headline could. Outside, the cold night air wrapped around them. Phoenix looked at Soren, who finally allowed himself a full, relaxed smile. "You know," Soren said, voice low and teasing despite the fatigue, "people will probably keep talking about us." Phoenix shrugged, a smile tugging at his lips. "Let them. We know the truth." Soren's eyes softened. "And the truth is?" Phoenix stepped closer, brushing a gloved hand lightly along Soren's arm. "The truth is, I like you, more than I should, more than I expected, and I don't care who knows." Soren's breath hitched, a faint warmth in his chest. Then, without a word, he leaned just slightly, closing the gap between them, a tentative, fleeting gesture that carried everything words couldn't. The night was cold, the world noisy, the spotlight still blinding. But on that quiet street outside the arena, for just a moment, there was only them. Rivals had become partners. Tension had softened into trust. Trust had blossomed into something undeniable. And for the first time, Phoenix felt certain of one thing. Some collisions were meant to change you. Some sparks were meant to ignite. And some falls were meant to be caught.